Okay, so Cyberpunk 2077, it has ultra-wide support from launch, and for that I have to give the developers credit. However, it doesn't have perfect ultra-wide support. One thing you'll notice right now is that the game actually is set to ultra-wide, so let's show off the settings. So we've got it at 3440 by 1440, and the graphics currently, and I'll show one of the issues with ultra-wide, just being it's more demanding to run. This is just everything set to ultra, which does put DLSS to auto, and especially I need that if I'm going to be running the ray tracing. And I'm running on an RTX 2070 non-super and an i5 9600K. The game's on a SSD, NVMe SSD. Anyway, let's see what we're noticing. So first of all, again, notice that the menus right from the start are not in ultra-wide. Now that's not the end of the world to me. I can totally understand that. Let's just hop in here, do a quick character creation. I'm not really going to create a character, but notice again, throughout the character creation, you are definitely, let's just make this guy super strong and maybe good with computers or something. All right. Oh, unused, and he's kind of cool. All right, one thing you'll notice, by the way, this is not ultra-wide specific, but you can tell that DLSS doesn't really help on the main character model very much. It definitely looks a little bit low res, but that's an issue beyond just the ultra-wide stuff. Anyway, so again, notice loading screens are also 16:9. Again, I don't really mind that. We're letterboxed on the sides, that's okay. I don't really mind. But what happens as we actually hop in here? So the game itself is ultra wide, including the like conversation type cutscene type stuff. And you'll notice my frame rate here is not great because, like I said, the game is absolutely maxed, but things do look really, really nice, which is good. The mirror, again, you can tell DLSS is not having a great effect on the mirror, which is fine. Now my frame rate here is slightly under 30 frames per second. So for conversations and things, looks nice. But, and I do want to show you guys that some games letterbox you in when you try to go ultra wide. So I do want to show you guys that if you compare this, so keep an eye on the edges of the screen here, right? So when I go into the settings menu and then pop back out, watch a slight delay as it renders the extra bits on the edge. So you can tell where the edges were and what extra field of view I'm getting from the ultra wide settings. Now speaking of field of view, I've just left it at 80. You could increase that to get even more field of view, but right now I'm just leaving things at the defaults. And I'm showing you that this game doesn't have the issue that some games do. Here, let me actually compare it to if you're actually in 16:9. So in 16:9, again, notice the edges of our screen. I'm gonna set this where we can really tell. So look at the edges of the screen. So there's that like dartboard kind of shape on the left, where right now we can, we're setting the edge of the screen to just be right there. And then on the mirror, you know, we're partially into the rectangle there. You can see we're cutting off kind of the edge of the second little box if you look at the edge of the mirror. So now let's make sure that as we go into ultra wide, that we are actually getting an increased field of view. Good. See, in some games, they actually crop in the top and the bottom and kind of zoom in your image and don't actually give you extra field of view. So this is actually giving us increased field of view. And I mean, just looking at the game, again, with the ultra ray tracing and all that, yeah, things look great, although my frame rate here is a bit low. Okay, so let's get into the biggest issue, although many people could play the entire game and not ever notice this or care. So the biggest issue for the ultra-wide experience is photo mode. So if you press N by the default, you jump into photo mode here. Now, I am attempting to scroll my cursor to the edges of the screen here. Do you notice I'm locked in the 16:9 space? Yeah, completely locked in the 16:9 space. Now, does that matter? Well, yeah. I mean, I can only scroll left in the menus, for one thing. Which, yeah, seems a bit ridiculous for this of all places to be the the place that we're having problems. So yeah, you literally can't get to the edges of the menu, which seems like a bit of a problem to me. Now I can scroll through these at least with the Q and E and all that, but again, I can't. I'm trying to drag this right, and I literally can't. Now I can use the arrow keys, right? So you can tell I'm using my arrow keys to get through this, but like, yeah, that seems like a pretty major issue and a pretty easy thing to fix. Now by major issue, I don't mean like you can't play the game. Obviously you don't need to use photo mode to play the game, but that's a pretty big bug as these things go, and I'm really hoping they get fixed up. All right, now let me find another portion of the game where we run into some issues. I've noticed in the tutorials, like the hacking tutorials and stuff, we'll run into some problems. Okay, so right here we see one of the issues we run into. So I'm currently in the hacking training section of the game, so doing one of the tutorials, and notice that when it's giving the tutorial explanation, that understands that I'm on a 21.9 monitor, and so it's trying to use the space. But the hacking menu itself is one of the portions of the game that is programmed for 16.9. Now, I don't mind that when I'm actually hacking. It works out just fine. But when you're doing a tutorial, and it's a 16:9 aspect ratio, and this happens at a few other points in the game, and again, anytime you're in a 16:9 locked menu, and the game is giving you a tutorial indicator, the tutorial gets cut off. So to upload the Ice Pack Demon, you must, I don't know, recreate its code sequence by selecting, I don't know, characters from the code matrix. Anyway, you can kind of figure it out, and it's fine. And this doesn't happen all the time throughout the game, but it's kind of frustrating if your tutorial, you can't actually read it. This seems like something that would be a super easy fix for the developers. I'm hoping it gets patched soon. As of the time I'm recording this video, we're on patch 1.05, and this glitch still exists. So this is one of the more annoying bugs as far as the Ultrawide support goes. All right, now let's talk, what does the Ultrawide add to the experience? Well, it's nice to be able to take in a larger field of view, kind of watch the city. Now, one thing you might be noticing again is with everything set to Ultra on my RTX 2070, this is very difficult to run. My frame rate right now, I know it's not recording the frame rate counter with my recording method right now, but it is 30 frames per second right now. So if you're okay with 30 frames per second, a 2070, it's a non-super, can get you 30 frames per second, even during the day in a big, pretty populated area of the city. Now on fast mouse movements, it feels a little choppy, but honestly, this is pretty playable. And if I use a controller, I've noticed it's even better. Now I will drop, like right now I'm dropping into the upper 20s, like 28, 29 frames per second. But it does add a level of immersion to the city. I do enjoy the ultra-wide settings, but just remember that it does come at a performance compromise. So again, this exact same graphics card, let's watch what happens if I run the game at 2560 by 1440. Now you'll see my desktop background here just because I'm in windowed borderless. That has to do with compromise I have to make for recording right now. But now things are much, much smoother. I've got a much better, let me actually full screen that so I can see my frame rate counter. Now I've gained, I don't know, 5, 6 frames per second, which percentage-wise is much bigger than it sounds if you're jumping from 30 to 35. And you know what? Even for the feel of it, my mouse movements feel a lot snappier. There's less latency to it. So just be aware that, as usual, running the game at ultra-wide has a performance cost, and in a game that's this demanding, that can be a big trade-off as far as run everything at ultra settings or not, and what kind of settings that you can turn on. All right, I'm gonna go back to the ultra settings. The ultra-wide setting, okay. And again, I really do like the increased immersion that I get from the extra screen real estate, But again, this performance is just a little bit too low for me. So personally on a 2070, now if you're running on like a 3080 or something like that, I think you're gonna be good. But on a 2070, what I've found is that if I'm running in ultra-wide, I can handle doing ultra with the DLSS on quality. And this gets me, like, even in a setting that's pretty demanding like this, I'm staying in the 40s to mid 40s on the frame rate, which doesn't sound great. Obviously, you'd rather be at 60, but I will say, compared to a lot of games, this feels pretty smooth in the 40s, honestly. I could even do combat here, it's not bad. And the game still looks absolutely amazing with the normal ultra settings. Honestly, even settings like medium, high, even low look a lot better than some games. So I will say that if I want to get my ultra-wide aspect ratio, I do have to turn down the settings a bit. Now, using the quality DLSS, rather than using the auto settings, which I think selected balanced for me when I was on the ray tracing mode, I do in some ways get a sharper looking picture this way than I did with the ray tracing ultra. But there is something to be said for the ray tracing, especially the reflections. The reflections are very noticeable. So I don't know, that's been a hard one for me. I really enjoy the ray traced reflections. They add a lot to the scene, but they also have a huge hit in frame rate. Leaving everything else the same, but kicking this on, I'm now down around 30 again. And I could, again, switch the DLSS back to balanced, but you know what, this isn't a guide for how to use your 2070 to play an ultra-wide. I'm just letting you know the kind of trade-offs that you might have to make if you're not running a 3080 or something like that, right? So, for me, on a 2070, if I want to do ultra-wide, I've got to forego the ray tracing. And then I get a really playable experience. I very much enjoy it. And, you know, sometimes I do like the ray tracing, and I have been kind of bouncing back and forth between ultra-wide or not. Sometimes I've been playing this game on my couch, on my TV, at 1080p, and when you're far enough back, you know, that doesn't look too bad. Using my controller, and with all of the ultra ray tracing stuff turned on. It's a bit of a mixed bag. I think you get something from both, and for those of you guys rocking like a 3080 or something where you could go ultra-wide, I really think it's worth it. Like I said, there's a few glitches here and there, but overall, it has very good ultra-wide support, as long as you're not too into the camera mode. And the few little glitches I've noticed aren't a big deal. The menu's not being ultra-wide. For me, I've never cared about that. I know some people do, but for me, it's a menu, guys. Who cares about the menu? Yeah, now, one thing I'll also mention, I guess, as a last little thing, is it does put the little, you know, the key bindings on the far edges of the screen in the mini-map, so you do have to look pretty far out of your way to see those. But in some ways, I kind of like that they're out of my field of view, because I can focus more on the city itself and the immersion, and only glance over there if I actually want to see that. So for me, that's a benefit, but I saw online that some people dislike that. I've also seen online that some people said that when they die, the game doesn't go back into ultra-wide and it gets stuck in the 16:9. I have intentionally died a few times to try to get that to happen, to record it for you, but that issue has never occurred for me. So, anyway, that's the game in ultra-wide. I think it's a great experience in ultra-wide with those few issues that hopefully get patched out of the game before too long, or maybe we'll get a community-made mod or something like that. For me, the biggest one, again, is the tutorial system getting cut off and the camera system being cut off. All right, guys, I'm going to play this game, and I hope you guys have an excellent day.